Whether it ends up good or bad, I think it's safe to say that 2021 will be a pivotal year for Intel. Now, I'm not saying that I expect Intel to swing back at AMD this year or usurp them necessarily, but I do think that based on what we see from Intel this year, it will give us a good indication of if they're going to swing back soon or if we are just in for another 3 years of pain. Actually, as an exercise for preparing my mindset for the final draft for the script of this video, I looked back at some of my Intel coverage over the past 2 years, and it's honestly been an interesting mixed bag of potential and repeated disappointment in Intel's ability to meet expectations. In fact, meet expectations that they told us themselves they would meet and didn't. Over 2019 and into 2020, it was basically this pattern in my opinion. One, whispers come out from provenly reliable sources pointing to impressive Intel products possibly coming out by 2023 or much sooner. And then number two, that's the future. Meanwhile, in the present, we just see Intel continually losing performance ground to AMD, followed by three, them failing to hit most of the milestones they set out for themselves. One thing I want to actually point out that I noticed in preparing the notes for this video is just how far the goalposts have moved for what will impress Intel fanboys. Specifically, back in March of 2019, I tried to point out to people how silly it was that reviewers were, with a straight face, comparing a $300 AMD chip that came with a cooler to a $500 plus Intel chip that required expensive cooling to be purchased separately. Just 2 years ago, we were talking about, or at least I was, how odd it was that Intel can only keep a 10 to 20% performance lead with inefficient chips that cost twice as much as their AMD counterparts. See, I don't know why it's fair to have called that an AMD counterpart when it cost half as much. That'd be like calling the 6800 a competitor to the 3090. But now in 2021, we have people celebrating a claim that Intel's Rocket Lake could beat AMD's processors in 1080p gaming by just 4%. In just 2 years, we have gone from people celebrating when Intel has the best chip by 10 to 20% to celebrating when Intel can do literally anything better than AMD. It really seems like in early 2021, people fully see Intel as a technologically inferior company to AMD. And let's be honest, Intel is technically inferior to AMD right now, at least in the desktop space and definitely in the laptop space. Intel is dangerously behind in early 2021. And with around only a year away from Zen 4's release, a leap that, while I cannot go into full details yet about it, listen, Zen 4 will be another Zen 2 level leap or higher over Zen 3. Zen 1 to Zen 2, that could be less than Zen 3 to Zen 4. Guys, time is simply running out for Intel. In other words, when I said in the beginning of this video that 2021 will be a pivotal year for Intel, I am saying so because if nothing pivotal releases from Intel this year, that is a pivotal action in itself. If they cannot start changing the tides of the silicon war they have with AMD this year, I don't know, a lack of a killer product, I think that will prove to be pivotal in itself, and I will start to doubt if Intel will ever catch up to AMD. Again, to be clear, I am definitely not expecting Intel to usurp AMD at everything CPU this year. But what I'm saying is if they cannot start to make up some of the lost performance ground that has been withered away over the past 2 years, I don't know if they will ever catch up again, or at least not anytime soon. And so in today's video, I will analyze of Intel's products coming out in 2021, whether it be Ice Lake X, Rocket Lake, Xe DG2, or Alder Lake, which one of these products, based on the inside information I've accumulated recently, is most likely to be something that can turn things around for Intel. But first, an ad from a sponsor. Today's video is brought to you by DataCamp. DataCamp is an online learning platform that makes it easy to build data analytical skills at your own pace with interactive courses. They endeavor to democratize data skills for everyone, whether it be individuals or organizations, large or small. No previous data skills are needed to get started, and you can learn from things as simple as Excel 101 to more advanced technical skills like database manipulation. Regardless of the industry or career stage that you are in, an ability to show true analytical comprehension and manipulation of the data being used by your industry is essential to either standing out or getting ahead in your organization. DataCamp is operated entirely in browser, so there's no special software needed, and DataCamp offers every first chapter of every course completely free. Subscriptions starting at $25 a month, and there is no credit card required to sign up and try out those free courses. Use the link below so DataCamp knows I sent you, and that is essential. Please use the link below so that I get recognition for sending you, and also so you get a free trial. Use DataCamp today. But here's the thing. As usual, it doesn't all sound hopeless, at least in this part of that three-part cycle for Intel right now. The general feedback I get is that this installment of a new CEO has rejuvenated enthusiasm inside Intel. People are happy to have a new CEO that has a highly technical background, and they are happy this specific one was chosen. Additionally, some products that I thought were going to be boring and have lukewarm enthusiasm behind them are actually bringing quite a bit more enthusiasm from some of my Intel contacts than I expected. Ice Lake X, for example, is one such product, and the reason I'm told people are excited about Ice Lake X is mostly that its platform is tremendously better than the previous 14 nanometer based platform. But additionally, I think there's something else going on here. I think if Ice Lake X is successfully launched with more than 28 cores by midsummer, it proves that Intel can make big 10 nanometer products. It proves that this is a real 10 nanometer year for Intel, and employees are excited to finally, even though it took forever, to be in the 10 nanometer era. Actually, on that note, one video I'll recommend from last year is my video that looked at projections for 10 nanometer and 7 nanometer products from Intel. This video was back when many tech tubers and websites like Semi-Accurate would not stop harping that 10 nanometer would never be a real node for Intel. Last he heard, DG2 and DG3 are actually being planned for TSMC, despite Intel legitimately still planning to use their own 10 nanometer as late as last year. So he's saying he tentatively expects 7 nanometer TSMC graphics cards mid next year and 7 nanometer CPUs mid to late 2022, which is farther out than the other source. And he is pretty damn sure Alder Lake is on 10 nanometer, Intel's own 10 nanometer, not 7 nanometer. Intel is really working on 7 nanometer, whether it's out early 2022 or late 2022, and everything up from now until then can be on a whole hodgepodge of nodes. Although it really is worth emphasizing that until Intel can afford to have all of their products not a node behind and manufactured on their own nodes, they're in a lot of trouble. What I had always heard, what was always gleaned by me by talking to sources, is that yes, 10 nanometer is years behind, but it will be a real node, and they will start repurposing 14 nanometer fabs into 10 nanometer fabs by the end of 2021. And 1 year after I reported they would do it, it seems like this is what Intel is officially doing, transitioning to 10 nanometer from 14 nanometer for much of their capacity. So let's just say that this isn't done yet, and this will be something I will be watching closely to determine how quickly Intel can compete again. The first canary in the coal mine is going to be Intel successfully, or maybe successfully not, transitioning to 10 nanometer for much of their lineup by the end of this year. That's the first thing we need to watch for. And again, they do need to accomplish this. I know that they are planning to possibly make some CPUs at TSMC in a couple years, but make no mistake, the minority of their products will be the ones using TSMC. Most of their profits come from their own fabs, and they need to fill those up with half-decent products. And so they really do need to transition much of their capacity to 10 nanometer successfully by the end of this year. And no product lineup will more perfectly illustrate just how desperately 14 nanometer shouldn't be used for anything anymore than Rocket Lake. Before I move on, let me just cover this product first from Intel in 2021. Rocket Lake is not going to be their savior. As I already pointed out, Rocket Lake is not something I have ever heard from inside Intel is a truly competitive product. I know some people were expecting it to be. I've never thought it's going to really challenge Zen 3. And look, maybe the 11700K will be a bright spot in the lineup if priced at $400 or lower, but all indications are that it won't be. And honestly, besides that, I'm really not hearing very good things. It's not horrible, but it is a year too late. And I've got multiple sources saying that they will be buying Zen 3 instead of Rocket Lake based on the performance they've seen so far behind closed doors. And yeah, I mean, that's really all there is to say. Rocket Lake should have been released, ideally with up to 10 cores instead of Comet Lake, but the power usage and die space taken up by this, Willow Cove-ish port, it's just not going to work with more than 8 cores. Power usage is out of control. The platform is expensive, almost created to milk PC gamers, which seem to love being milked lately. It's just, this is not their savior. But let's not dwell on this any longer. Let's move on to a product that I suppose a lot of people are hoping could be a savior of Intel, or at least a sign that things are turning around for them this year. Xe DG2. Look, at the very least, what I can say about Xe DG2 right out of the gate is this. It is at least perceived throughout the company as something that is real, coming this year in 2021, and has to succeed. So whether it succeeds or not, large parts of Intel believe it should. And honestly, though, that doesn't make me encouraged, because this has always been the story of Xe from my perspective. It has always been one of potential in what it can be and no confidence from any key sources who have touched it in what it will be. All the way back in 2019 and into early 2020, I was talking about whispers of people seeing Intel GPUs behind closed door expeditions, in closed door exhibitions that were performing as well or better than NVIDIA's best cards at the time. They said they saw cards that were outperforming the 2080 Ti, but they always had massive power draw or instability problems, or both. So, I don't know. It couldn't work in a product yet, but if they could tame that beast, everyone said it did perform. But I don't know, this mentality of if we can just get it to work, but we aren't sure we can, really hasn't changed much based on the information I have. But yeah, actually, let's get to the slide on updated Xe DG2 information. Now, the majority of this Xe DG2 leak is going to be interesting. It's not going to be like the previous ones that went over specs, and that's because, honestly, I'm a bit tired of telling you guys the latest updates on Xe specs when I'm still not really sure this is ever going to come out. But you know what? I feel like I have to. The old thumbnails were in previous parts of this video, so you can watch old videos of mine and follow the story yourself if you want to. But for completionist's sake, I do feel like I have to go through what the latest info is on Xe's specs. And keep in mind that I have been reporting the majority of these for half a year or longer when you see similar things in other leak websites from a week ago or something. Xe DG2 is based on an enhanced version of the architecture in Tiger Lake's iGPU with 512 execution units, based on what most of my sources say. That's a little up in the air now, actually. And 16 gigabytes of GDR6 over 256-bit interface. And these specs here are what kind of keep me hopeful this could be good, because despite not being multi-tile, as far as I'm aware, that's just going to be for the professional versions. Even just as a single monolithic design, 512 execution units is over 5 times the execution units of what's in the top Tiger Lake APUs. And when those aren't thermally constrained, they can get pretty close to a GTX 1050 in some tests. So, I mean, let's look at a rough estimate of where that would place it. And yeah, it's pretty close to around a 2080 Ti, which is what I have always been told the target was, above a 2080 Ti and recently around a 3070 or hopefully a 3080. That's never really changed. That's always been the target, and most of the time they've said there are some samples hitting that. And also, TSMC was always mentioned for consumer cards, well, at least since like mid 2019 to me. And specifically, I confirmed 6 nanometer was called out as the node by multiple reliable sources last year, that would be their introductory launch partner node. I believe I was the first to say that as well, despite other people claiming exclusives. Anyways, let me get into how I want to present the majority of this information. I think you guys have a rough idea of what's going on. They basically want to have an upper mid-range card out by the end of the year, and you can see the specs. But I have talked to some of my best sources and organized them by color so you can see there are different voices that should give you an idea of what's going on in the background. Now, to be clear, there were more than 3 sources used to get Xe DG2 information, but I've decided to use the ones that have never been wrong in the past, and that's because some of their info conflicts with each other. So I'm just being completely transparent here to paint as accurate as a picture as I can for why I'm kind of lukewarm on Xe DG2, despite some very reliable sources saying good things. Anyways, let us get into it. The first source. EU counts haven't changed, 512 at the top, and again, saying that's around a 3070 or a 3080, and then also 256 and 128 EU dies, all these monolithic, and it should be launched in full to gamers this year. He also says, I'm not exactly sure on the node anymore, that the performance target hasn't changed, and as far as I know, Raja was never seriously in the running for CEO. Now, another source. There was a power struggle over whether to allocate additional resources towards Raja's DG2 group or Alder Lake and its engineering team. Alder Lake won, and as such, Intel is putting any available spare resources towards Alder Lake's development and a timely launch. And so far, performance is not a problem, but DG2 is having massive stability problems. Additionally, it may no longer be on TSMC 6 nanometer. That right there is a pretty huge red flag. Also, I'm fairly certain Xe DG2 will slip to Q4 or have an extremely limited Vega Frontier-like release in Q3 to keep investor promises. Raja is in hot water right now, and he knows it. He threw a Hail Mary pass to become CEO and failed. That's something I've reported on repeatedly in multiple broken silicons and leaks, and there's a ton of pressure on him to succeed on DG2 now. But I am honestly not sure if the pressure is helping or hurting the DG2 team's progress. So as you can see, there's one source saying things are going along even if a little delayed, and he never really heard of Raja running for CEO. But I have other sources that say he did. So that just tells you how much of a Hail Mary pass it was for him to go for it. I want to be clear. Just because other people in Intel didn't hear about him running for CEO doesn't mean he didn't. I have some sources that I trust really dearly connected to some of these teams that confirmed to me over and over that he was running for CEO. Remember, these are the first people. These were the same people that told me Raja wasn't going to be pushed out of the company last year when there were other tech tubers saying they were 100% sure he was about to be fired. He wasn't. I'm sure of my sources, even if sometimes they don't agree. Finally, a lot has changed recently. I'm being told performance is now terrible too, and I think Raja is considering leaving. After looking at all those quotes and the information I put together, you put a gun up to my head, what do I really think's going on with Xe DG2? I think the median outcome for DG2 is something better than DG1. A Vega Frontier-ish release, if you will, late Q3 or Q4, and then some gamer paper launch shortly after that, with it up in the air how much volume they'll have into 2022. And if that's the median, that means that I believe there is an okay chance that DG2 actually gets released in notable volume in Q4 as a mid-range graphics card. But that, Vega Frontier-ish outcome as the median also means that I think there is a below the median chance, that there's also just as good of a chance as the good outcome that we don't ever see a true consumer launch, that DG2 is barely a better outcome to DG1. And so, yeah, I guess what I'm saying is I think DG2 will release this year most likely, but that you shouldn't bet on it being great. And the reason I wouldn't bet on it being great is I'm hearing whispers that it might not be on TSMC's 6 nanometer anymore. And I'm not sure why TSMC would be somewhat backing out of making it their introductory launch partner product if they thought Z would come out anywhere near on time and look good, right? Make no mistake about this as well. TSMC is starting to get very business savvy. From what I'm hearing, they want the first products on a new node to make a big splash that makes TSMC look great. Zen 2 certainly did this for them, and RDNA 2 has as well. So this backing out to me suggests that TSMC isn't so sure they want to make Z on their node because it won't be worth it. It won't make them look good, and they'll make much more money off of something else, whether it's Zen 3 Plus or some type of an RDNA 3 chip. And hearing this should really concern people hoping for a successful Z launch this year. Nobody is more aware of their capacity problems than TSMC themselves, and a part of this awareness is an acceptance that some products will sell off the shelves quicker than others and make higher profit margins. So if TSMC isn't wanting to give one of their more cutting-edge nodes to Z instead of something else, that should really give you pause for how good it will be. Although honestly, not as much as a pause as the whispers I've heard of key people inside the Z team not feeling optimistic. I know Intel is touting Z's performance, and they have some samples that have been impressive that they're showing all over the company, but there are people within the Z team that really don't see it as possibly being a competitive product that will make them look good. And let's be clear. Intel has been trying to launch competitive discrete graphics cards since the early 2000s and really before that. So any launch of a product that is even remotely competitive with NVIDIA and Radeon in both efficiency and maybe not even performance, but price performance would make Raja look good. My point being, it doesn't really matter overall for Raja's image if Xe DG2 can't match the 3080 or even the 3070, or hell, if it just trades blows with the 3060. If Intel made something that's at all competitive with any part of the market and launches and you can buy it on Newegg, this would be a graphics milestone for Intel. Raja could say, I made Intel a graphics card competitor. We may not be in the top end, but they haven't come close to this any time in their past. And let me just say that Intel showing off this professional version of a Z graphics card with 3D stacking doesn't change my opinion on the status of Z at all. It's stated that part of this 3D stack design will use their own in-house Intel 7nm. So, I mean, yeah, right there, this looks incredibly complex, and using their own 7nm, this would not come out until late 2022 anyways. I'm talking about 2021, and honestly, I just see this as a preemptive strike against what will undoubtedly be leaks about Zen 4 and Radeon 3D stacked graphics architectures that should be sampling somewhere near the mid to late portion of 2021. This is Intel trying to get the spotlight with 3D stack tech ahead of AMD, even if you won't be able to buy this for a year and a half. So if he's considering leaving, I don't know. I think that there's a good chance that it may never really come out. And in fact, I would say that you would expect him to probably leave soon or within the next couple months. So there's some real distance between when he leaves and when that product comes out, so he can at least claim it wasn't his fault. But if he stays when he hasn't left yet, that would suggest to me that it could still be good. So again, I guess that's all there is really left to say about Xe DG2. I'll let you judge for yourselves based on these quotes from Inside Intel what you think's going to happen, but my opinion is it's 50-50 on if it's a decent product. Don't bet money that it is Intel's savior. So what could be Intel's savior? Well, probably the product having resources put towards that instead of DG2. Alder Lake. Is Alder Lake and its much discussed Golden Cove architecture that I have been talking about for years going to be the product that proves that Intel is done falling further behind? Well, maybe it is. Let me get to my Alder Lake updates. All right, here we are. The architecture I believe that could keep gaming CPU prices in check and prove to us that Intel's future could still be bright sooner rather than later. Just like the Xe DG2 information, I'm going to present a quick recap of really what I've been reporting for over a year, despite others claiming they have exclusives, and then go into information from different sources. So first of all, 8 Golden Cove cores with hyperthreading, and then 8 little cores. That should be the top i9 SKU, and they may even advertise it as 8 cores, 24 threads, hybrid threading. Now that's not confirmed, but I know that they're considering it both to make the number of big core counts they have compared to AMD look good, like, oh, we need half as many cores as them, and also to try to avoid misleading advertising, because there would probably be a pretty big backlash if they try to claim it's a full 16 core like the 5950X. Additionally, this should have 10 to 20% higher IPC over Willow Cove in Tiger Lake, but that's only in laptops. For a comparison to what's out from Intel now on desktop, this should be 35 to 50% more IPC than Comet Lake. Now, I know that sounds insane, but guys, it's been years since they've had a new architecture out. Rocket Lake isn't even out, and that's going to make up like a third of this difference or something. And additionally, yeah, it's on the SuperFin 10 nanometer node from Intel with higher clock speeds than Tiger Lake or Tiger Lake H. This is them getting close to 14 nanometer clock speeds as they get into the full 10 nanometer era. And of course, PCIe 5.0, DDR4, and DDR5 support. I do have to highlight that I've been reporting that since 2019, despite some tech websites making fun of me for saying that and then pretending they always knew that the whole time. And a Q3 2021 launch. Again, what I've been reporting for years, despite people saying that's exclusive now. So this is from the first source. Alder Lake is on track. Extra resources are going towards ensuring the platform is ready on time from board partners, right? As far as I'm aware, the actual like core and CPU development has gone fine, but the extra resources right now are towards helping board partners get their stuff out on time. And he also says at this point they are targeting early second half of 2021. Now do not double down on this yet, but it is starting to look like it could even launch by late summer. Additionally, it still has PCIe 5.0 support. The only bad thing I've heard from this source is that NVMe devices won't support PCIe 5.0, but to be entirely honest, we don't even really have a decent roster of 4.0 devices that can match PS5 speeds. They've still disabled that in that console, so I really wouldn't actually worry about having PCIe 5.0 NVMe drives this year when they wouldn't be ready for years anyways. And this is the most exciting part. Alder Lake is much more competitive with Zen 3 than Rocket Lake, and it should slot into the same pricing tiers they have now. So, yeah, you know how you guys are seeing Rocket Lake try to sell its top 8-core i9 for 10-core Comet Lake i9 prices? This top 16-core i9 from Intel with Alder Lake could cost just $500 to $600. It doesn't look like they're insisting on raising prices. To another source, Alder Lake was fast-tracked recently after recent testing suggested it's extremely competitive against AMD's current and future offerings. Now, I pushed back on him and asked follow-up questions. He says, to be clear, competitive does not mean it will beat the 5950X in multi-threading, of course, but do not rule out that the top i9, the 12900K, could demolish the 5900X in multiple use cases at a similar price point. And to be honest, Intel sees the 950X series, that of course the first one was the 3950X, actually I own one, as a pseudo HEDT product. Actually, I really don't disagree with Intel. It really is kind of an in-between consumer and HEDT product that I'm not sure they really should try to compete with on consumer motherboards. So these are two sources now saying it's competitive, and additionally saying that its launch is being pushed up. I did not lead them on. These are entirely separate people who have never been wrong before saying similar things. And Intel is now trying to get an early Q3 release if at all possible. It will almost certainly be out by October. So yeah, I would say that if there's a Zen 3 Plus, this should launch pretty close to that. And another source, unless something changes, board partners don't think they will be ready till late Q3 and Q4. Now, this is interesting because this, again, separate from the other sources, is saying board partners are lagging behind. And it's funny that other sources are saying Intel's putting extra money that they were considering sending to the DG2 team to Alder Lake to help board partners get their boards ready. And those board partners are also testing Micron 4800 megahertz CL40 1.1 volt DDR5 memory. And this is another thing you guys might want to note. Most motherboards seem to be choosing DDR4 support. I don't believe there will be many motherboards that have both DDR5 and DDR4 support like we've seen before with, like, you know, how I think it was like AM3, I believe, supported either DDR2 or DDR3, and some motherboards supported both. No. You got to choose. And most partners are choosing DDR4 support with DDR5 reserved for the Halo motherboards that will cost a lot more. Oh, and one more thing. These aren't the same sources as the DG2 sources. I will neither confirm nor deny some of them maybe, but not all of them are. So don't think that all of these colors correspond to the same people from the last leak. So yeah, if DG2 is a 50-50 chance of being a decent product that will undoubtedly still not be the savior for Intel, I think Alder Lake has a very good chance of being an impressive product that's getting a lot of extra resources put behind it right now, because Intel knows this is the thing that could not just compete with Zen's mid-range and win by 4% in 1080p gaming, but possibly win in all gaming with the entire AMD lineup and beat most of the Ryzen lineup at quite a few things. I think there's a chance Alder Lake is the real deal. Again, this isn't going to be something that like crushes Zen 3 Plus or Zen 4, but it could be something that launches and for 6 months or so is the CPU to get for most consumers, unlike what's been going on with Intel over the past 2 years. And so I think it makes a lot of sense why Intel would put extra resources behind Alder Lake and not behind DG2. Just like AMD has been prioritizing Zen's development over Radeon's, and that's worked out well for AMD, Intel is doing the same for their CPU division, because it's finally hit them that if they can't stop the blood loss, losing performance to AMD over the years, that it's just going to get much, much worse. And actually, now that we're bringing up AMD, let me mention that AMD is making similar decisions for RDNA 3 versus Zen 4 from what I'm hearing. There's a reason you're seeing Zen 4 shown with 5 nanometer and RDNA 3 with advanced node. Make no mistake about this as well. Zen is the priority over Radeon and will be for the foreseeable future, and now Intel is making those same types of decisions. But the fact of the matter is that right now, AMD is the market leader, and they probably will be for the remainder of the year. Rocket Lake is not going to save Intel, and Ice Lake X is really just proving 10 nanometer works. Xe DG2 is not going to be their savior, even if it's okay, and it might not even be okay. No, it's Golden Cove. Golden Cove is the CPU architecture that will play a pivotal role, if you ask me, for Intel this year. A very pivotal year. Not one that makes them the new market leader. That's just going to be AMD until Zen 4 and probably a bit later. But it is the one that will prove whether Intel is starting to turn things around or if they probably never will. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. It was a pretty exhaustive look at how I see competition going for the rest of this year and which products from Intel will be essential to being a success. Alder Lake, don't worry, I've got Zen 4 information coming and RDNA 3 leaks that I'm working on as well, in addition to other little things going on with RDNA 2 and Ampere and other architectures in the background. So make sure you subscribe to this channel and ring the bell button so you don't miss out on all those other videos and podcasts coming up for the rest of this year. And please consider sharing the content, hitting the like button, doing as much as you can to get the word out for Moore's Law is Dead. This is a year that will be pivotal for Moore's Law is Dead as well, as we are trying to grow. Remember that we have tons of exclusive ad-free content and podcasts that are only ever released for patrons every week. So subscribe to the Patreon at the tier you can to get all of that. And as always, thank you for watching.